Hello and welcome to this program specially dedicated to celebrating International World Health Day, which is normally celebrated on the 7th of April every year. This year is no different, as we are going to be hosting members of Kaduna State University debate community, and this debate community has produced a group of 500 level students who will be talking about hypertension as a silent killer disease. So do stay tuned as I hand you over to the studio. My name is Aisha Ayuba.
Hello there, thank you for joining us. I'm David Oyibo, a 500 level medical student of Kaduna State University. April 7th is World Health Day, an important day where we celebrate the health of individuals all over the world and how we can promote it. And today we are going to be focusing on the topic hypertension as a silent killer, which is a very pertinent topic in our times and in our days. And with me to discuss this topic today is a colleague of mine.
My name is Ibrahim 500 level student of Kaduna State University. We are here to actually discuss on the topic hypertension, a silent killer. What is hypertension and what causes it? Hypertension is one of the medical conditions common in our environment. Hypertension is the major cause of death, premature death worldwide. According to World Health Organization, WHO, 1.28 billion of people in the world aged 30 to 79 years of age are hypertensive. 47% of these people do not even know they are hypertensive. Hypertension can be seen or can be regarded as a raised blood pressure or high blood pressure. Hypertension can be defined as persistent elevated blood pressure above the normal level of an individual for that age. Clinically speaking, hypertension can be as well regarded as persistent elevated blood pressure of an individual. That is when the systolic blood pressure is greater than 140 millimeter of mercury, and when the diastolic blood pressure is greater than 90 millimeter of mercury. And these readings must be taken on two separate occasions. Some school of thought says on two separate days, that is day 1 and day 2. On these two separate occasions, the first occasion, two readings are taken of at least 2 to 5 minutes apart. Then when these two readings are analyzed or assessed, when the blood pressure of this individual is greater than this 140 millimeter of mercury for the systolic blood pressure, and when the diastolic is greater than 90 millimeter of mercury for the diastolic blood pressure for this individual, who say this individual is hypertensive or is having high blood pressure. But the good news here today is hypertension, just like I've stated earlier, it is the major cause of premature death worldwide. But the good news here is that hypertension can be controlled and can be prevented. Thank you.
Okay, just in addition to what you said, Raymond, you talked about global numbers, 1.28 billion people suffering from hypertension in the world. Coming down to our region here, actually read recently that about 38% of Nigerians actually have hypertension, to show you that the burden is actually much, even in our environment. Now, looking at the normal values of blood pressure, you are said to have a normal blood pressure according to the Joint National Committee for the Detection, Evaluation, Treatment, and Prevention of Hypertension. They said your normal blood pressure should be below 120/80, right? And they went on to say that you are pre-hypertensive, meaning that you can actually be predisposed to having hypertension when your blood pressure is about 120, that's the value above, to 129. Then for the value below, for the value below 80 to 89 milliliters of mercury. So that's pre-hypertension. As my colleague just said, hypertension itself is anything from 140 and above, over 90 and above. So these are the values when it comes to blood pressure and that of hypertension.
David has actually stressed the normal values for hypertension, for blood pressure in our locality, in individuals or in persons. Now that will take us to another point of our discussion today. Are there things that put us at the risk of having hypertension? Yeah, basically hypertension can be grouped or can be divided into two. We have the primary hypertension and the secondary hypertension. The primary hypertension, these are the form of hypertension that we see more in our locality. According to World Health Organization, about 90 to 95% of individuals with hypertension are of the primary hypertension, while about 5 to 10% of individuals are of the secondary hypertension. But we must not forget that the primary hypertension, we don't know the causes of this primary hypertension. But the secondary hypertension can be known. The causes of secondary hypertension are known. Some of these causes ranges from kidney problem with the adrenal gland. Adrenal glands are actually glands located above the kidney. We have a problem, so there's some individuals having diabetes, individuals on drugs, prolonged use of steroids, women that are on contraceptives could go down with hypertension. And all these are secondary form of hypertension. Now, what are those factors, risk factors that predispose an individual to having hypertension, primary hypertension? Some of these risk factors can be grouped into modifiable and non-modifiable risk factors. The modifiable risk factors are those factors that are under the control of man. Some of these modifiable risk factors include: 1, obesity, alcohol intake, smoking, high salt intake, lack of exercise, etc. When we consider the non-modifiable risk factors, these are those factors that we cannot really control. Some of those factors include advancing age. 2, the race of an individual. Of course, hypertension is common more in blacks than the white. Another factor that is other than non-modifiable risk factors is the family history. When you have a family history of hypertension, there is a likelihood of you developing hypertension along as you advances in life. So these are the non-modifiable risk factors. We have so many of them. And of course, another one we can actually talk about is the climate. Research has shown that people who live in cold climate have likelihood of developing hypertension than those ones who actually live in hot environment. Thank you.
Raymond, you talked to us about the different risk factors for hypertension. Looking at the younger generation, we've noticed that there's a lot of trends towards hypertension in young people. And why exactly is this happening? Is it related to what you said about the risk factors? Now, looking at all these different risk factors, it's more pronounced, especially in this day and age, in young people. Now, you have a lot of young people getting obese, right? Young people are no more engaging in physical activity like before. You have young individuals engaging in things like smoking, alcohol, like you mentioned. We have young individuals especially exposed to psychological stress. And I think this is a major problem in our day and age. Why? All right, so looking at our economy, even Nigeria, you know that the economy is pretty difficult, especially for young people. Young people are finding it difficult to thrive in this economy. They have to hustle, do multiple jobs, take care of themselves. Some students need to pay their school fees, need to meet up with life, right? Also, the trend of technology, social media, has not helped in any way to increase this, because we notice that young people are attached to their devices, always going through their devices, checking Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, constantly comparing themselves with other young people and standards which are very difficult to reach. right? You have young people spending so much time on social media that they have problems sleeping. They start developing anxiety, depression. All this actually contributes to stress levels in young people. And we've begun to see a trend of hypertension in these young people. And also, very, very important, like you said, Raymond, genetics. Genetics seems to play a heavy, heavy role. So if you find a young person having hypertension, just look around and you see that probably his parents or a close sibling has hypertension. So genetics is very, very strong in actually the development of hypertension in younger age groups. And this is why we advocate for lifestyle modification, lifestyle adjustments in the modifiable risk factors, just like Raymond mentioned.
Yeah, David have actually communicated something so important to us, that hypertension could be a very vital issue in our society, in our locality, at our locality, or in Nigeria particularly. Of course, we have pointed risk factors associated to hypertension. So that would bring us to the topic of discussion today, David. Yeah, hypertension as a silent killer.
Yeah.
Yes, we agree. Hypertension as a silent killer. That's the topic of our discussion today. Why do we pick up this topic? Or why we use this phrase, a silent killer? Why? Because hypertension more often are symptomless. Hypertension are symptomless. It does not show signs and symptoms at those early stage. But of course, we must not forget that this damage is ongoing. This damage is ongoing. And so that result, or that leads us to complications associated with hypertension. We have so many complications associated with hypertension. One of them is stroke. Individuals that have hypertensive or that is having hypertension could go down with stroke. And when you have stroke, that is, in the clinical world, we call it cerebrovascular accident. Yeah, when individuals that have stroke who actually have issues with moving one part of the body, have deviation of one part of the body, inability to, go on to exercise, to do one or two activities through the day, even ability to speak will become an issue. We have cardiovascular issues like heart failure. Individuals that is hypertensive may actually have issues relating to the kidney. So, and individuals with such complication may present with symptoms. But we must not forget that the secondary form of hypertension that has a traceable cause, that is, the cause could be a kidney problem, could be diabetes, could be use of steroids, prolonged use of steroids, could be maybe somebody that is having kidney problem, as I've stated earlier, may show with signs and symptoms. So in that situation, it is not symptomless, and that is for the secondary form of hypertension. But primarily, or the primary form of hypertension, actually, at that point, it is symptomless, especially without complication. Thank you.
Yeah, and you talked about it being a silent killer, meaning it's important for our listeners to know that you need to actually get your blood pressure checked, because hypertension largely has no symptoms, right? So it's very important to check your blood pressure. Nowadays, we have something we call trans fats, right? It's pretty popular now. But what exactly are trans fats, and how do they contribute to hypertension? Now, trans fats, like the word trans, transform, or transfer, are simply fats that are in liquid form, which have become solid, right? So trans fats are basically two kinds. You have the naturally occurring trans fats, which you can find in foods like beef, lamb, dairy products. And actually, when we consume these naturally occurring trans fats moderately, they have little or no effect on our health. But the real problem is artificially occurring trans fats. Now, these are the fats that you find in fast foods, baked foods, your donuts, your meat pie, your egg roll, your cakes, fried foods, your potato chips. And even when you reuse oils, trans fats are actually increased in those reused oils. This is very important because Nigerians need to learn to cut down on trans fats, your fast foods, all those high caloric high calorie containing foods need to be actually reduced like a whole way lot. Every single person that is listening to this, I know that it's normal to just say you want to buy your Coke, your buns, your meat pie and all that, but you need to learn to restrain yourself and cut down excessively on your trans fats, because they build up your level of what we call bad cholesterol. We have the good cholesterol. We also have what we call the bad cholesterol. Trans fats build the levels of bad cholesterol, can predispose to hypertension, stroke, cardiovascular diseases. So it's very important that we actually look at this as we adjust and modify our lifestyle.
Yes. David pointed a very important and striking issue that our audience need to put into consideration, the issue of trans fat. Trans fat, actually, at one of the research, there was an article I read not quite long about trans fat. And of course, just like David pointed, that trans fat actually seen or can be associated with cardiovascular issues. Yes, very, very correct. And they said in reused oil, one of the ways to reduce trans fat is to add onions. So I think this should be very important to our listeners here. Yes, well, of course, when you add onions to your reused oil, it reduces the level of trans fat. So I think this will now take us to preventive measures. When we're actually beginning the conversation, we stated that the good news about hypertension that we are talking about today is that hypertension can be controlled and prevented. Yes, what are the preventive measures? It was a modalities put in place by World Health Organization. And that is the DASH. That is directory approaches on how to stop hypertension. So, and this put into consideration our way of life, our lifestyle modifications. What do you eat? We are a product of what we consume. So it is very important for us to put into consideration what we consume. What are the diets you're taking? You're taking diets that are rich in fibers. That will help you reduce the risk of hypertension. You take vegetables, you take fruits, reduce alcohol intake, reduce or stop smoking. It is important for us to reduce the level of salt intake we take in, because all these things are predisposing factors to developing hypertension. It is important for us to reduce the level of consumption of fatty foods, of foods that are rich in saturated fats, because all these are predisposing factors. And finally, it is very, very important, friends, our listeners, our audience out there, to know that regular exercise is important to help reduce the rate of development of hypertension. And of course, finally, our advice that regular checkup or measurement of blood pressure is very, very important in this age and at this moment in time where hypertension is at a rise, or there's a surge in hypertension in our community, in our society. Thank you.
Yeah, so looking at, you talked about physical activity, I just remember that the WHO actually recommended that every individual should have 30 minutes of exercise every day for 5 days. That's about 150 minutes of exercise throughout the whole week. So it's very important for individuals to know this. And what kind of exercise are we talking about? We're talking about things like brisk walking, jogging, playing tennis, playing football. Move your body. That's what WHO is actually trying to tell us, right? It's going to help to cut down your levels of your predisposition to hypertension. And they actually said it can do that to up to 14 millimeters of mercury. It can cut down your predisposition to hypertension. Now, when we talk about blood pressure measurement, how often exactly should you measure your blood pressure? Now, everybody should get a medical checkup at least once every year. And I believe also everybody should get their blood pressure checked once every year. It's very, very important so that you know your numbers consistently year in, year out. And what we usually recommend for this is that about a week to your birthday, just give it to yourself as a birthday gift, that you go into a hospital or go to a medical practitioner, get yourself checked, do your blood work, get your blood pressure checked. It's very, very important. because, as we said, hypertension is largely symptomless. You can have a blood pressure of 200 over 120 and you'll be moving about normal, but something can just happen at any moment, and that could be a very, very serious complication, like Raymond has just mentioned. So try as much as possible to measure your blood pressure once a year at least, and that's very, very important for everybody out there.
Yeah, just like David stated, I think he has actually buttressed my point and the discussion I actually laid earlier. So finally, we actually want to advise and tell friends that there are a lot of digital devices out there that a lot of people use to monitor their blood pressure and a lot of apparatus. But of course, we are not saying those devices are not good, but we advise and encourage our listeners there to go to the hospital and use the normal manual sphygmomanometer and stethoscope to measure your blood pressure, because that is very, very important. And of course, those of you that actually use your devices out there, digital devices to measure your blood pressure, we advise after measuring it, you go to the hospital to actually compare the values you have so that you know the region you are actually standing at the level of your blood pressure. Are you on the side of being hypertensive, or on the side of hypertension? Are you normotensive, or are you on the side of being hypo? So this is why we advise friends, we advise colleagues, we advise individuals, we advise citizens of this nation to go and compare your values to the values you have from your devices, because hypertension is a very vital thing that must be addressed and must be carefully controlled for you to have a healthy living in our generation, in our society at this moment in time.
If you're just joining us, we've been in the studio with David, Oyibo and Abu Raymond, and they've been talking about hypertension as a silent killer disease and measures that you should take to avoid contracting the disease. Still in commemoration of World Health Day, we still have members of Kaduna State University debate community who are also medical students in the name of Memunat and Gloria, who will also be telling us in their own opinion the ideal way to celebrate World Health Day.
The World Health Day is a day set aside yearly where people are supposed to celebrate their health status. So I think the theme for this year is health for all, and I think for this year and every other year subsequently, people should use the World Health Day as an opportunity to generally assess their health status. You could just decide to go to hospital and do a general checkup, just have general tests done and then try to know your health status as an individual. I think it will help to diagnose or to get any early signs of any underlying disease or something. I think that's really important.
I think you have to be diagnosed by a physician that you are hypertensive. So when you check and it's consistently increased on 2 occasions, when there's an increase there's a persistent increase on 2 occasions, and you can actually diagnose that this person is hypertensive. But other than that, you wait for the physician to direct you on whether or not to start medical therapy.
So everyone listening out there, make sure you get your blood pressure checked after you listen to this. And actually, we advocate that you tell everybody you know about hypertension. Tell them about the risk factors and how, of course, they can begin to adjust their lifestyle so that they can live more healthy lifestyles and actually reduce their risk of coming down with hypertension. I
think finally that was the target of WHO. And of course, it's very important for our listener out there to know that WHO will be 75 years.
Yeah.
Of course, these are 75th birthday, right?
Yeah, 75th.
Yes, and of course, the coverage for this year is health for all. That's the theme for this year's WHO World Health Celebration, health for all. So we advocate for individuals to go and get their blood pressure checked. Thank you very much.
And it is on this note that we've come to the end of the program, specially dedicated to celebrating World Health Day. Prevention remains the key to curbing the contraction of these silent killer diseases. So please try to get your regular medical checkups. I remain Aisha Ayuba.